Hey everybody, and welcome to this week's De-JOE-tional. First of all, today is July 14th, and it's Dude's birthday. She is 19 today. We've not been to worship in the last couple of weeks because we've been gone with Ignite, and we're going to be gone this Sunday, the 17th, as well, at Elsa United Methodist, Alton Grace United Methodist, and Hartford United Methodist. So we're going to miss the chance to sing happy birthday to Dude in worship. So I may sneak a little word to Pastor Jay and see if he can remember it during Joys and Concerns this Sunday. So happy birthday to Dude. So this chapter, we are continuing with our book, The Subtle Art of Not Giving Up. It's always funny how my cough comes in right at the right time there. And chapter 4 is the value of suffering. Now, it's a pretty long chapter, and there's a lot of stuff that went back and forth, a lot of examples given. So instead of highlighting and going through these things, I kind of wrote everything out this time. So I apologize if it looks like I'm reading, but I'm reading. But I'm reading my notes and not from the book. My notes are from the book, but you know what I mean. Okay, so the value of suffering. On December 26, 1944, Second Lieutenant Hiroo Onoda of the Japanese Imperial Army was deployed to the small island of Lubang in the Philippines. His orders were to slow the United States' progress as much as possible, to stand and fight at all costs, and to never surrender. Both he and his commander knew it was essentially a suicide mission. 2 months later, the Americans arrived on Lubang and took the island over with overwhelming force. Within days, most of the Japanese soldiers had either surrendered or been killed. But Onoda and 3 of his men managed to hide in the jungle. From there, they began a guerrilla warfare against U.S. forces and local population, attacking supply lines, shooting at stray soldiers, and interfering with the American forces any way they could. This took place for the next 25 years. Over those 25 years, the American and Japanese and Philippine governments made several attempts to communicate with Onoda that the war was over and to stop attacking everyone and everything. But each time he was convinced that the information was fake and it was an attempt to get him out of hiding so they could kill him. They dropped leaflets from planes, sent search teams out to find him, and even airdropped letters from the emperor himself, all to no avail. By 1972, a young man named Norio Suzuki heard the story of Onoda, now somewhat of an urban legend, a war hero who sounded too insane to actually exist. But Suzuki was an adventurer and kind of a hippie. He couldn't hold down a job, he hated school, he volunteered on farms for food and donated blood to pay for places to stay. He found Onoda in 4 days. It took those governments almost 30 years. He found him in 4 days. Humans often choose to dedicate large portions of their lives to seemingly useless or destructive causes. It's hard to imagine what Onoda could have been happy, or it's hard to imagine that Onoda could have been happy on that island for over 30 years, or that Suzuki went on this wild goose chase with no money or friends just because he was kind of bored. It was something to do. Yet, each of these men had no regrets. Onoda was proud of his choices and claimed that it was an honor to dedicate his life to, by then, a non-existent empire. Suzuki was always searching for the next adventure, no matter how ill-advised. They both chose their suffering. They both chose the circumstances with which to live. To them, their suffering meant something. It fulfilled some greater cause, and because it meant something, they were able to endure it, or perhaps even enjoy it. If you're doing something that causes you to suffer, you shouldn't be asking, how do I stop suffering? Instead, you should ask, why am I suffering, and for what purpose? So as you all know, I love my job at church. I love serving Godfrey First and helping to fulfill our mission to bring people to Christ and Christ to people. But I can tell you, it ain't always easy. Now, I'm not going to go as far as to say that I'm suffering, but there are days when I have to remind myself why I'm doing what I'm doing. Why I'm the only person there for the praise team, or when we don't have enough people for a choir or bell choir, or when youth don't show up for GPS, or when they do, they make teaching difficult, or when the Ignite kids don't learn their music or moves or don't show up, or when the sound system doesn't do what you expect it to do. It can be very frustrating, and it can cause me to lose my focus of why. That leads us into our discussion today from Mark Manson, the author of this book, where he talks about the self-awareness onion. There are multiple layers to it, and the more you peel them back, the more likely you're going to start crying at inappropriate times. So the first layer is the most basic. It's a simple understanding of one's emotions. I feel happy when, or I feel sad when, I have hope when. That's it. There's nothing deeper. I feel happy when Susan and I are taking Jeep rides. It's just that easy. Nothing deeper. The second layer, though, is tougher. It's the ability to ask why we feel certain emotions. I've talked about this often. It's easy to not think about the why. You can't just be happy or mad or sad. There has to be a reason. But these why questions may not be readily known or even matter. Why do I feel happy on Jeep rides? Mostly because in the Jeep, nothing else matters. In fact, I've named my Jeep Elsa after the Disney princess from Frozen because when we're in it, we let it go, let it go. In the Jeep, we don't dwell on the day-to-day hurdles like paying bills, dealing with customer service people, or for us, going to the doctor. On the flip side, many people in our world today seem to be upset or mad at everything. Why? Why do you care? That's kind of the whole point of this book and why I decided to do this series. It's to help us understand our why. The author then goes on to talk about a third layer of self-awareness. And he describes this as a layer full of tears. The third layer is our personal values. It goes beyond the why do I care level into why do I consider this to be a success or failure? How am I choosing to measure myself? By what standard am I judging myself and everyone around me? This is the most difficult because we tend to not be very honest with ourselves. We tend to sugarcoat our own feelings because we will do just about anything to avoid bringing ourselves to tears. But it's the most important because our values determine the nature of our problems, and the nature of our problems determines the quality of our lives. They may say they feel a certain way, but not actually go through the steps to actually get there. For example, they may say that they value honesty in a friend, but then turn around and gossip about everyone behind their backs. This is where self-help gurus have failed. Someone may come to them and say they're miserable because they're not rich enough. So they provide ways of getting more money instead of attacking the values-based question of why do you feel the need to be rich in the first place? Or how do you measure success or failure for yourself? There's a value that's at the root cause of their unhappiness, not the fact that they don't drive a Bentley. Good, honest self-questioning is often most difficult when it's true, so we avoid it. So here are some common values that create poor problems for people. These are problems that can hardly be solved. One is pleasure. Pleasure is a false god. Research shows that people who focus their energy on superficial pleasure end up more anxious, more emotionally unstable, and more depressed. Now, he talks about drug addicts or people who have committed adultery or whatever. They've got pleasure in that one moment, but it ends up causing more problems for them behind the scenes or in the future. Pleasure is the most superficial form of life satisfaction and therefore easy to obtain, but it's also the easiest to lose. You're constantly reaching for a new high. You're constantly looking for a new way to be happy. Another common value that creates poor problems is material success. Many people measure their self-worth based on how much money they make or what kind of car they drive. The biggest problem with that is we tend to prioritize it over values, such as honesty, nonviolence, and compassion. You're better off measuring yourself by your behavior, not your status symbols. There's a saying that teachers have it varies amongst the teachers and what they have in their classroom, but they believe that a student will remember how they made them feel instead of what they actually learned in the classroom. It's the values, it's not the stuff. The third one is always being right. The people that base their self-worth on always being right about everything prevent themselves from learning from their mistakes. They also lack the ability to take on new perspectives and empathize with others. They always have to be right. They always have to have it their way. I'm always right. You're always wrong. That's just the way it is. The fourth one is staying positive. Now, there's nothing wrong with trying to find the silver lining in bad situations. I even like to say that I don't have good days and bad days. I have different degrees of good days. Some days are definitely better than others, but I don't like to think of having bad days. Now, the author says that's kind of a mistake. It's okay to admit that sometimes life sucks, right? Constant positivity is a form of avoidance. As we've talked about in our Mr. Rogers series, if you can mention it, you can manage it. If you're avoiding it, you're not going to be very happy. Being positive is great as long as you recognize that sometimes bad things happen and it's okay to be mad or upset. To close, self-improvement is really about prioritizing better values and choosing better things to care about. Freud once said, "One day, in retrospect, the years of struggle will strike you as the most beautiful." Okay, Sigmund, we'll see. There was a lot more to this chapter that I'm not going to get to, so I still encourage you to get this book and read it. I still cannot recommend this highly enough. Next week, we are going to do chapter 5. You are always choosing. So for this week, that's my De-JOE-tional. Blessings.